Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Manor Club's evening program series. I am your host, Giovanni Smith, and I'm the Community Relations Director for the Manor Club of Pelham. So, our conversation tonight is one that I think we're all kind of talking about, the COVID pivot, opportunities in the chaos. So, we are joined this evening by our esteemed guest, author, writer, and overall activist. I think we need to add that to your resume, Colleen Gardephe. So it's a pleasure to have you here this evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, just to give the viewers and our guests that are here in the audience a little bit of background, just tell me a little bit about yourself, and where did you go to school, what did you study, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you, Giovanni. Thank you, Carol and Derek, and welcome. Thank you. I have a soft spot for Pelham Manor because my aunt and uncle lived here for decades and sadly passed. Barney and Jean Ferguson. They lived right here across the parking lot with Lady Perpetual Homes, and they were big fans of Pelham Manor. So,
Wow.
thinking of them. I studied journalism. I got a master's degree in journalism from the University of Missouri,
Mhm.
and I have an English degree from the University of Pennsylvania. So, and I am the mother of four, including triplets.
I know.
So two girls and a boy, and then an older daughter.
Right.
So that's, of course, it's wonderful. Luckily, the triplets sort of read the manual that they were triplets. And, we're really pretty easy because people would always assume it was,
Hectic.
chaos and stuff. But we went really well. So delighted to be the mom of triplets and
Wow. Wow. Well, it definitely sounds like you had a full house
yeah,
growing up
yes,
or raising
yes,
them, rather.
yes.
Um, so within that full house, you've also had a very full and robust career
Yeah.
this entire time. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I guess let's start with the beginning of how did you how did you decide on English? And then how did that lead to journalism for you? Because we find, English majors, they tend to go a million different ways. Law school, med school.
Yeah,
So
that's
tell me a little bit about that journey for you.
Well, I always loved reading books, so that led me to being an English major, and I enjoyed writing. And then I had two older brothers who I listened to very carefully because I was the little sister. So my oldest brother suggested that I study journalism. So I said, okay. He suggested that I go to the University of Pennsylvania. Okay. He actually saved me once from a near drowning. So I owed him my life, literally.
In
So-
so many ways.
So whenever he said do this or do that or suggested this or that, I would say, okay, sounds good. So yeah, but I have really enjoyed being sort of having been an English major and a journalism student because I think being able to write well is really critical. And
Yeah.
journalism also teaches you in a way how to think and how to prioritize.
Mm.
I would often do stories where I would have to interview maybe 10 or 12 experts on a topic. And then you have to sort through the notes of what they said and prioritize and think, okay, these 4 experts all said this, and these 2 experts disagreed. So you have to sort of set it up that way. And so I always really enjoyed the whole process.
Wow. Wow. Well, it sounds like your brother was really on it.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Yeah.
So in kind of thinking about thinking and prioritizing, you've had, like I said, this really robust career, and a lot of it has been in, various publications and communication spaces. So I guess, on the fun side, right, what are some of the best or your favorite stories that you've had the opportunity to write, and what publications were those for?
Okay.
So if you give me maybe 2 or 3.
2 or 3. Okay. All right. Well, there's a few that come to mind. One, when I had the triplets, I can have a little show and tell. I was working already with Healthy Kids and American Baby. So they sent a photographer to my house and photographed the baby triplets. And I got to write about what it was like and getting ready for it and thinking about my older daughter. And so that was, really fun.
Let me see, I'm going to hold that up. So that,
Yeah.
in case anyone's going to zoom in for our live streaming.
Yes, and you could see the vertical triplet stroller that, was so, so big to maneuver.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was really fun. We each had our own baby. And one time we went on a plane when they were really pretty brand new. They weren't even a year. So our 6-year-old daughter, older Tess, got to be the adult holding a baby on the airplane. And she was such a great assistant. She'd be like, here's the diapers, here's this, how's that? So that was really sweet.
A parent's dream, right?
Yes.
That's your oldest.
And we credit Tess for having triplets, because when she was a young girl, she said she wanted a brother, a sister, and a baby, because she didn't want to be alone. And that's what they got.
Wow. Wow. So it runs in the family.
Yes.
Are Tess and her uncle close?
Yes. Calling the shots. Yes.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah. So that was a fun story. I was the editor of a business travel magazine, and I got to do a great story on Ben and Jerry's many years ago, and they were so much fun. And
that sounds sweet.
That was really sweet. And I, went up to Vermont, and of course I show up in true New York fashion, all in black with heels, and there's like snow up to here. So I got to be part of their holiday party, and which was so much fun. They had employees singing Blue Christmas, and it was really fun. And they were great to talk with, because they were doing a lot of innovative business practices. They had a rule that the highest paid employee can only make X amount times the lowest paid employee. So they had a real fairness and equity approach, which was really nice to see.
So they were progressive.
They were really progressive way back then.
Okay.
And they were one of the first companies too that did a lot of community outreach. And a lot of companies follow that rule more so than the CEO can only make X amount. But they did get the message about, community involvement, which was great. So that was a really fun story.
Adding Ben and Jerry's as next place to work.
Right. Yeah, I would think that would be a fun place to work.
It sounds like it.
Yes.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
So speaking of fun places to work, what were some of the other publications that you had the opportunity to write for?
Right.
Because I know you've done a lot of work as a freelance writer,
Yeah.
which I think is something that applies to the writing space.
Yes.
A lot of work that writers do is
Right.
not just for a set publication. It's an article here, an article there, a book over here, which we are going to talk about.
Yes, yes.
So, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, focused a lot of my writing initially, although I have done other business and travel types of stories, but on women's health and pregnancy and parenting. So I got to write for Parents Magazine is here, and Child and Parenting, and then I was on staff at Healthy Kids Magazine, where I also did a lot of writing, and I really enjoyed that. I had one daughter, and then I had the triplets. So I had a vested interest in learning all about parenting and education and fields related to that.
So a question I'm going to insert here is that, a lot of times I think writers speak of the creative process, which we're going to go into yours in a second. Mm-hmm. But when we speak of the creative process, we often talk about, or the advice is, you need to write what you know. Mm. So do you feel as though that was applicable throughout your writing journey, or was it something, did you ever think you would be writing so much about parenting and life, or did you kind of stumble into that because it happened to be something that was organically happening to you?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. And I think that when you're in journalism school, and certainly as a new writer, you're really a generalist, and if, as you may hear about, brand new newspaper writers, one day they're covering a fire and the next they're covering a political campaign. And you have to really be able to sort of write about any topic because you don't know what your assignment is going to be. So you have to be prepared. So it's more of how you approach things, that you, of course, you have to answer all the W questions of, when, who, why, what, So, you go through that process of, all right, what information is really necessary and what information will be particularly helpful, particularly on any kind of service articles, then you really want to give everybody a full scope of this is how you do this, or don't do that, watch out for this. So, there's those sort of aspects. But I found throughout my career that even when I switched to kind of nonprofit management, writing was key. I would do the annual reports, I would do the updates, and now even in my current role that we'll talk about in a while, I do the reporting for the judge on how the participants are doing. So I do this 7-page memo, and so a lot of things come down to writing. That's a way to kind of give everybody the update on where we are and how everyone's doing. So I think it's a really important skill.
Right. I mean, I couldn't agree more.
Yes, I know you love writing. You're so good at it.
I love writing. I have my MFA in creative writing. So I'm an advocate. I also majored in English. So I'm an advocate for knowing how to write and writing well.
Yes.
So you talked about in your time as a journalism of, making sure that the elements of your article are also helpful.
Yes.
So that I think is a great lead-in to your own book that you wrote.
Yes.
About the myths of pregnancy and parenting, which I have here. Don't pick up the baby or you'll spoil the child, and other old wives' tales about pregnancy and parenting. So, of course, I want to know all about this. And it sounds, it sounds very helpful.
Yes.
So I do also kind of want to touch on how your journalism background and having those questions and thought processes in your mind helped influence writing this book.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question because, I would lay out what some of the myths were and then either debunk them or explain why there was sort of a tiny grain of truth or, so there was, sort of a little bit of a medical research approach to some of the, myths and things. A lot of them are, a lot of the myths are the fun ones that you hear, like when you're pregnant, someone will say, oh, you're having a girl because, one theory is that the girl steals your beauty. So, or, another theory is, if you have like this nice round belly and it's not like all over the place, it's a boy because
a neat carry.
And then one is, if the baby has a lot of hair, you get heartburn. I mean, a lot of them are silly, but we do in the book address some of the, do I let them cry it out or do I, so some of the tough questions and, is spanking really terrible? Yes. So there are
Is
a lot
it
of
really? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
yes, yeah. So, and one of the fun things too was looking at some of the international old wives' tales, like wild, like sit on the left side of the roof and you'll have a girl, So that was kind of fun. But I really enjoyed doing, the research for that as well.
Wow. And
Yeah.
was so the left side of the roof, was there anything else internationally that stood out to you that was, I don't know, was it really a myth?
Nothing that is striking me right now. I'd have to go back to it, but some of them were really funny, like
Yeah.
wild. You're like, where on earth did this theory come from?
And how did it stick for so long?
Yes, right.
So I see that this book is hardcover.
Yeah.
So was this pre the movement of self-publishing, or was this kind of in the height of sending the manuscripts out and
Yeah.
getting, where were you? Because, the publishing world has changed
Yes, that's true.
so much,
Yeah.
and so many people can self-publish.
Yeah.
And which is funny because even in the writer community, there's almost like a little joke where,
Yeah.
like, oh, I have a book, and it's like, oh, is it self-published? Oh,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So this clearly is not self-published.
No. No. This was interesting how this came to be. I had written an article about old wives' tales, about pregnancy and parenting in a magazine, and it was a lucky break that a book producer saw the article and called and asked if he could co-write the book with me. Now, the advantage to that, I got to do the research and writing, but he got to do the selling of the idea and the manuscript to a great publishing company, Chronicle Books.
Right.
And then Barnes and Noble reprinted it as well. So, it was fun. We got to do, a book party and talk on radio and TV shows.
Right.
And so that part was really fun. It was sort of a good win-win situation.
Right. And did you find that there was any frustration in having a co-creator or a co-author?
Yeah. Well, yes, but in life it's a give and take, right? And he was providing the benefit of handling the business side and selling the book, So we got it published, we got to do all those things. So I just saw it as a win-win. I was fine.
Well, it certainly seems like it. I mean, a lot of people cannot say, like I said, a lot of people can say they're self-published, but it is really awesome when you have the opportunity to have a publishing house take that on. And so were you involved in, the book jacket design and even, down to the type of font, but also the type of paper that's used? That's something that I think a lot of people don't really know about when it comes to agreeing to publish or a company agreeing to publish a book, is that they consider every single aspect.
Yeah.
Do these colors?
I know, it's true.
Yeah. Do they relate to parents, or does this give you the feel of a self-help book?
Right.
And different colors and fonts tend to say that. So, what was your experience like in having a hands-on approach to making those decisions about your baby?
Yeah, right.
One of your babies.
Yes, right. Well, in this case, the publishing company really designed the look and everything. So we didn't have that much input on it, but I thought it looked nice and I was happy with it. So, yeah.
Well, I think it looks fabulous as well.
Yeah.
And what year was this?
I was trying to remember that. My daughter was a few years old, so it was in the early 90s.
Okay. So yeah, still, like I said, before the self-published craze kind of happened. So, I mean, you've written this book, you've promoted the book, and simultaneously, what are you doing at that time? Were you just focusing on the book, or were you freelance writing and working on the book?
Yeah.
Kind of where were you in that space? And then we can kind of swing back into a little bit more of your professional and volunteer experience.
Yeah. I was concentrating on the book when we were promoting it, and certainly when I was writing. much of it and researching. But I was, pretty much continually doing some freelance writing work,
Okay.
so I enjoyed that, and I was able to continue for the most part, so that was good.
Well, that sounds like it was all working.
Yeah.
So in 2006, you transitioned to a communications position for a nonprofit, Family Services of Westchester. So how did that come about?
Right.
Um, and yeah, where did that kind of take you next?
Yeah. It's funny. I had two good friends ask to meet me for coffee, and they asked if I would consider taking this job. And my triplets were about 10 at that time, and I was mostly doing freelance writing. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And I kept trying to think of other people who would be good for the role. I was like, oh, maybe this one would like it, or maybe that one would be good. And so eventually I was thinking, you know what, this is a great opportunity. I'm just going to say yes, because it was part time. It was from like 9 to 3. So while kids were in school, I could be working.
Right.
And it was great. I really enjoyed it. And I made some really close friends. And we had Family Services Westchester has a Big Brothers program. And I got to do a magazine with the kids from the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, and that was a lot of fun. And then we had this one amazing story that actually got international coverage, because my role was then to also try to get the press to write about, Family Services Westchester. So this man who was in his 60s, people had always told him he should be a big brother because he was so great with kids. So he decided in his 60s he's going to say yes to that, right? So he's matched with a young boy, and they stayed together over the course of decades. So the older man put the younger man through college. Then the younger man asked him to be his best man at his wedding. Yes, and he named his first child after, Chester, because they had had such a close relationship. And we were able to get that story in like People magazine and Good Morning America, and Associated Press wrote about it. So then we were getting like notes from people in China, like, what is mentoring and what is human?
Wow.
Yeah. So that was really fun. It was like, okay. So, a lot of these things are, just opportunities that surface, and you need to sort of run with them, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of sounds like not quite the same, but kind of like, what was the movie? Finding Forrester?
Oh,
Was
yeah,
that
right,
it?
right. Yeah.
The beauty and the power of good mentorship,
Yes.
right? And
yeah.
it has no age, it has no
Oh,
gender,
yes.
it has nothing except good hearts
Yeah.
and willingness.
Yeah.
So moving past that, you spent your time in family
Yeah.
services. Was it after that it was MBK,
Yeah.
My Brother's Keeper, for you?
Yes, and
Okay.
actually, after Family Services of Westchester, I had worked with this woman, Sue Rabati, early on for like a childbirth educator magazine, and she was starting a new medical website called MedShadow, and it was about side effects of medication.
Wow.
She was interesting, a DES daughter. That meant that her mom had taken DES when she was pregnant, and the theory behind DES was that it would prevent miscarriages, and then it ended up having all sorts of terrible, terrible side effects.
Wow.
So she was determined to try to get that message out there, and she asked me if I would be the content director. And so I was going back to more of the editorial part of
Yes.
life. I love coming up with story ideas and assigning the stories, and being creative. So I really enjoyed that as well. And it was fun to sort of go back and forth between the editorial side and that communications piece.
Right. And then by the time you got to MBK, you were in full communications mode.
Yeah, that's
for
true.
the most part.
Yes.
You were in full communications mode, and that is actually where we first met.
Yes,
through
of course.
MBK.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your MBK experience. And MBK is My Brother's Keeper. We were part of My Brother's Keeper New Rochelle, which was the initiative under President Barack Obama.
Yeah.
So, and you were at the forefront. I mean, there was really, as much as I know you adore being backstage and behind the scenes, at the same time, there was kind of no MBK without Colleen.
Yeah.
So tell me how you became involved in
Right.
NBK
Yeah.
and then how that just kind of blossomed.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. It was another one of these fortuitous events that occurred. I was friends with Angela Taylor, who was the assistant to the mayor. And when NBK was starting to form, there was a big summit with like 300 people, and there were groups and committees brainstorming how are we going to launch this initiative and implement the initiative. And she asked if I would, as a volunteer, help with the communications. So I was working part-time as the content editor for MedShadow in the city,
Right.
and then coming home and working with NBK. And what happened then is I got to do this action plan report.
I remember
Yes,
this.
yes.
I remember
So with
this.
all the charts and see, all the people in the summit were writing their notes. And anyway, so I got to do this action plan report, which became the blueprint for the initiative. And then when they were looking for somebody to help move the initiative forward, they thought that I would be a good candidate because I had done some of the research and writing
All the
and
graphs and reporting. This was all
so
her.
establish some of the goals. So, and I loved working with that initiative, and there were so many great people involved, and the two co-chairs were terrific, City Councilman Jared Rice and Reggie Richardson, who was the principal at New Rochelle High School.
Yep.
And then there were lots of, we had milestone committees, so there were chairs of them and groups, and it really had a very sort of organic feel. And it was also like having a blank slate, that you are free to write on, because it was like a startup basically.
Yes.
So, and everybody, like if I threw out an idea, they'd be like, okay, sure, great, just figure it out and do it. So I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out and do it. And so we got to do this Take a Student Ambassador to Work Day, which was on the same day as Take Your Son and Daughter to Work. And it was wonderful. We ended up having, several hundred kids over the years go to IBM and Morgan Stanley and the Public Theater, and with locally with the mayor and judges. And so that was great, and the students really loved it. Some of them were really interested in medicine, so we took them to Montefiore and Lawrence. And the employers were so wonderful. They would really, go all out to give the students a real sense of the company and the industry. And then we had lots of chaperones, and so that was fun. And then we had ESPN college workshops for boys of color.
Right.
And so it was really fun to just come up with some ideas and brainstorm with people. And we had a community reads program, which was great. And so we had authors come speak with us at the library, and there were all sorts of discussion groups around the books we chose.
Right.
So it was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, you were a rock star for the entire time there. And I think this idea of not only just reaching back, but fostering those connections as you go.
Yes, right.
Right. And getting to know those people as you go.
Right.
And trying to stay involved and active with these networks once you leave a specific area.
Yeah.
So I think that's particularly true, because was that where you kind of fostered your relationship with Judge Rice?
Yes.
And now your current position.
Yes, my current position is with Judge Rice, who launched, the NBK initiative in New Rochelle, and then he became a judge in New Rochelle City Court. And he quickly saw that the young people who appeared before him were disconnected. They weren't in school, they weren't employed, or they were underemployed. They didn't have good family ties. So he said, in his mind, we have to do something. We can't just sort of constantly look out at this and not do anything. So he launched this great initiative called Opportunity Youth Park, where he matches these young people who appear before him with community organizations that offer workforce training, job placement, mentors, college access, GED classes, help with mental health and substance abuse. So it's a wonderful program. I mean, it's really incredible. There's about 110 participants now, about 75 of whom are active in the program, and about 30 who have moved on for various reasons. Sometimes they moved geographically, or uh, sadly, a couple have had higher level cases, so they're moved out of that. So, I love that program, and I love the team that he's assembled. And Giovanni's now our mentor coordinator, and he's going to do a great job. So we're really excited about that. And yeah, I love it. And, I had worked with the judge for many years on NDK, so we had a nice working relationship.
Right. And yeah, I'm very excited to be a part of the
Yeah.
program and the team as well. It's an amazing initiative that I really believe in.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel all of your skills thus far?
Mm-hmm.
You've had 1,000,001 experiences, jobs, publications. How have you been able to leverage that into this position?
Mm-hmm.
And, to kind of bring us back to that COVID pivot,
Mm-hmm.
I think all of us have to be a little more aware
Mm-hmm.
of the working climate, the working culture.
Mm-hmm.
We could be employed today and unemployed tomorrow.
Yeah.
So in thinking of that, we'll get to some more career advice and
Mm-hmm.
tips, but kind of thinking about that initially, how do you frame yourself and position yourself within this job
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get you ready for your next job?
Yeah, that's funny. Well, it's interesting because New Rochelle, even though there's about 80,000 people, right? It feels like a small town. Everybody knows everybody, or there's lots of people who are related to each other, and so there is that really nice sense of community. And as I was mentioning, a lot of my work as a coordinator does involve writing, and every week the judge meets with about 10 or 12 participants in a conference with the community providers and the mentors and lawyers for an hour. And then he meets with the participants who also are, there with the lawyers and the mentors and the community partners. So before that, that's on Thursday afternoon. So Wednesday night, I'm up pretty late writing this 5 to 7 page memo to the judge about, okay, well, this participant is doing amazingly well. Had this phenomenal internship, is back in college. And then, then on the flip side, this participant, not so much. They're not going to their appointments. They're not in compliance with, the program that he's outlined, the judge has outlined for each individual. But then, he responds to that. So if he sees that someone isn't complying, he'll talk with them and he'll encourage them, and he'll offer other ideas, and so it's helpful. And one of the things I get to do as well is write letters of support for the participants, for the district attorney, and that's wonderful because you get to really be an advocate for them, and when they're really doing well. You can sort of help their situation, which is wonderful.
Right.
So I really like that. And, many of the community partners were also involved with NDK. Daniel Bonet was the co-chair of the NDK advisory board, and Westcott is the anchor,
Yes.
Community partner. So, there is that sort of continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I think I said activism earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that writing those letters, that's part of that activism piece, which I think is something that as we go through our professional experiences, we add on other titles that we didn't necessarily intend to. But it all ties in.
Yes.
Right.
True.
A lot of journalism is tied into activism.
That's true. It is.
And speaking up and helping individuals have a better understanding of something, of a myth.
Yeah.
is part of activism, because sometimes the information is just not there.
Right. That's true.
So kind of standing in the gap is part of that.
Right.
So I do want to ask a little bit about what are, I don't know, 7 is a lucky number, right? Lucky 7 is your lucky 7. So what are 7 tips that you may have in regards to navigating the workspace and, and being a working, not just a working woman, but a working mom And how do you, how do you balance all of that?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, relevance is a big word now,
Yeah,
as
that's
you're
true.
looking at yourself in the workspace. Am I relevant? How do I stay
Yeah,
relevant?
that's true. Yeah,
So what's some advice that you have for the working professional?
yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. I think you, in any work situation and also in relationships, you want to sort of add value.
Mm,
So yeah, you're thinking about, all right, what can I do that I'm going to be able to add value to this situation? And in my current role, one thing I try to do is be sort of on the lookout for opportunities for the participants. Like the judge was asked to be on a panel of this Youth Justice Summit with Westchester Children's Association. So as we were talking with them, I was thinking, well, we have one of our participants goes to John Jay and studies, criminal justice. And could he maybe have a mini internship helping to plan, the summit? And they said yes. So, and then,
wow.
when I called the participant, he was really excited. So, to be always sort of on the lookout and being aware, I think is something that's helpful.
And if I may, I think I'm going to interject and add being brave,
Yeah.
being courageous, because it takes courage
Yeah.
to, I think as an individual, I see a million and one cool opportunities,
Yeah.
and I probably talk myself out of a million and one of them,
Right.
maybe a million and two, because I'm nervous,
Yeah.
like, well, what
That's
if they say
true.
no? And I think what you said just there is, like, okay, but what if they do say no? Okay,
Right.
so what?
Yeah.
But we'll never know, and
Right. That's
look
true.
at the doors in that advocacy
Yeah.
space that
Right.
you're able to open for others.
Right.
So
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really important too, and I'm mindful of that, try to pay it forward. When I left my role with Healthy Kids magazine, I was able to get two friends to follow me. So that was nice. And when we were looking for a mentor coordinator for the Judges Initiative, the judge and I both thought of you because you did such a great job with NDK. And I
honored.
know you, and lots of people speak so highly of you. So I think it's nice to be able to, try to help others when you can.
Yeah.
And I do really prioritize, I think, my family and work. And like if you
Mm.
came to our kitchen, you would still see the blue mica countertops and the blue linoleum. And, so, in life, you make your choices, right?
Right.
And so I chose, kids, family, work.
Yeah, in that order,
Yeah.
right?
The kitchen, oh, not so much.
It's livable. It's not Grey Gardens.
Right, right.
You
So,
know?
yeah.
So what other tips? So we definitely have adding value
Hmm.
and searching for those opportunities.
Yeah.
I think we can also talk a little bit about technology.
Yeah.
Technology is not going anywhere as much as we would
Right.
like it to.
Yes.
We are closer and closer to having robots
Yeah.
do everything than we are from, the Industrial Revolution. We're kind
Yeah.
of in this constant
Yes.
technological revolution that
Hmm.
is growing faster and faster. So, how do you feel, and what's your advice? I guess this is a two-part
Right.
question. How do you cope
Hmm.
with the ever-changing, ever-evolving space of
Hmm.
technology in the workplace? And what is your advice to someone who maybe is not as technologically advanced? Because believe it or not every millennial knows what they're doing. There are plenty
Yeah.
of millennials that are very clueless, they don't really know. And some of it is just not knowing where to start.
Yeah.
So, what do you recommend and what do you do?
That's a great question as well. Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember when I went to Family Services Westchester, we were starting social media posting and website writing. And then when I was at Med Shadow, they even wanted the editor to handle like the backside of the website, which I think is the really technical aspect.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to embrace it. I mean, at points I was, I felt like I was going to go down this resistance corridor.
Right.
And the reality is that's not a good path.
You need to just say, okay, and you find the nicest, smartest young person to explain everything to you. And luckily, I found Devron Chambers, who was so
Yes.
great. And, he would tell me about Hootsuite, which was the scheduling platform for social media. And he would like walk me through everything. And so I think you need to embrace it and just do your best and find people who will help you. I do feel like I could have maybe done more in terms of maybe taking classes. LinkedIn has classes
Mhm.
and other, even adults learning at high school. So, but I did luckily rely on the advice of friends and colleagues, and I learned that way. It was always grateful.
Yeah. Well, finding a nice young person, even as I guess a young person myself, depending on
Yeah.
where I am, I do have to turn to 12-year-olds and
Yeah.
9-year-olds. My mentee, who's actually Devron's daughter,
Right.
is very helpful.
Oh, yes.
And finding the wherewithal to just admit that I don't know what I'm doing
Right.
and take the little chuckles and the side laughs that they give, but
Yeah.
lovingly, they
Right.
say, "Oh, you just have to do that."
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's nice. I was able to do that once upon a time for my mom,
Yes. Right.
and to have young people do it for me is very heartwarming.
Yes.
It's a good experience. Um, let's talk a little bit about volunteerism as
Mhm.
well, because I think one thing that is um, evident
Mhm.
throughout
Yeah.
your resume is not all great positions are paid,
Mhm.
right? And within not all great positions are paid. When we first kind of talked about this,
Mhm.
you coined the term high level volunteering,
Right.
which is something that was very new to me. I had never heard of, thought of, or known
Mhm.
anything about that. So,
Mhm.
can you talk to us a little bit about high level volunteering, and then how do we leverage that? Because I think sometimes when we see that it's a volunteer
Yeah.
experience or it's
Mhm.
volunteer on your resume, it's kind of like, oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Right. 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 Yeah.
So, how do we kind of, add value to the
Right.
fact that
Yeah.
we did do this job and did hold this position
Right.
and it was serious?
Yeah.
And how do we navigate that? What's
Right.
your advice for?
I think that volunteering is so important on a number of levels because obviously helping either people or a cause, or so that's always a positive,
Right.
and in and of itself is a good result. Now with MBK, I started as a volunteer and did a lot of work. I had to sometimes be up at like 2 in the morning working on this action plan report. So I was committed to the initiative, and
Mhm.
so I didn't know that there was going to be a wonderful job at the end of my volunteering, and it lasted many years, and made many good friends through it. So I think you have to just be open to that possibility that something great will happen, and at the very least, you're going to be doing something positive for somebody or some
Right.
group of people or some goal. So to think of it that way. And I'm also on the board of the Westchester chapter of the United Nations Association. And I like that volunteer work very much because I'm the co chair of the program committee. And we have an event coming up for UN Day on climate change. Having a lot of young people be moderators and experts talking about the need for dramatic action at this point. And I
Mhm.
think we have all seen it ourselves, right? With Ida and fires on the west coast,
Yeah.
and floods in Europe, and hurricanes and earthquakes, and you sometimes one day I looked at the front page of the New York Times, and every one of them was a disaster story.
Sheesh.
And so I also had the chance to do a panel on maternal inequities for women of color.
Wow.
And because you'll find that very sadly in New York at one point, uh, Black women were 5 times more likely to die in childbirth or immediately after
Yeah.
birth.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was reasons that could have been, addressed and
Right.
fixed, and then
Right.
certainly in some countries overseas, there's terrible numbers. So you can get to do really important work, because you're talking with the experts on an important topic.
Right.
So, and I think, the volunteers who work at the League of Women Voters and the Junior League, and there's many opportunities to do interesting work, and you also make good friends through volunteering. So if you have that ability, I think it's definitely a great option. I also think it's helpful if you, say, have young children or you're helping with an old parent, to not have this big gap on your resume. So
Right.
that if you're on, be able to work on the program committee of the United Nations during that time, great. You're still getting to do some important work. So I think it's something for everyone to look at and consider.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And in regards to resources, sometimes, you're in love, you get married, you move, you go to a great new place,
Yeah.
and now what?
Yeah.
Or you have kids, and then it's like, well, now what? So, what are some of the resources that you would recommend in going about to find some of these awesome volunteer opportunities?
Well, there's an organization, Volunteer New York, that they actually have a wonderful leadership program called Leadership Westchester, which is about 9 months long. And that's a wonderful program that I got to do. And a lot of people in New Rochelle have done this program, the mayor and Judge Rice,
Yes.
and, lots of people. So I think, just sort of also tapping into your network is good for both jobs and volunteer opportunities. And, I think those would be the primary things. But also, if you really like an organization like Red Cross, you believe in their mission, you can look at the website, contact somebody, find out what the volunteer opportunities are, because everybody loves volunteers, right?
Everyone.
Yeah. So I think there's, you just have to do a little research and you can find a good opportunity that would be a good match.
Yeah. And in addition, your local library.
Yeah, the local library. The local libraries, that's a great idea because, there's, I know New Rochelle has a woman who will look at your resume and suggest how to overdo it and take it, in a different direction and give you career advice. So there's a lot of good free career advice,
Right.
Through the libraries.
Right. And, within that space as well, Indeed
Yeah,
is
indeed.
really, really good. And I feel
Yes.
as though that is a little overlooked at times.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
maybe because it seems so saturated, so it seems a little overwhelming when people go to look at Indeed. But when you start to go through the filters and kind of sort your area, your space, or your location, what you're interested in, then all of those opportunities start to come up as
Yes,
well.
that's true.
So utilizing Indeed, and of course, my favorite, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I was just going to bring up LinkedIn. Yes. And you can even look at the postings in LinkedIn and think, wow, this person sounds great. I'm going to, look into their company or their mission and see if I can work with them. So that is really definitely a great resource.
Right. And kind of to go back to the career advice, what about kind of rebranding yourself? You hit an impasse, maybe you're not as passionate about what you once were, and you're looking to do something new.
Right.
So do we start from the bottom? Do we go back to school? Do we get a new skill? Do we start volunteering in that space if we're able to?
Yeah.
Right. In some instances, you're not. What do you recommend for the person that is rebranding? Because I think a lot of COVID.
Oh, right.
The COVID space.
The true reckoning.
Yes.
Yeah. Definitely.
There's been a moment to pause, and now all of a sudden, I don't want to be in healthcare. Like now we know.
Right.
So what do we do now?
I think all of the above, maybe get a certificate, a 6-month or 9-month certificate in a particular area. If you have friends who are doing the kind of work that you want to do, to maybe try to job shadow them or, meet with them, learn what they did. maybe they would be willing to introduce you to other people in that area, in that industry, to go to conferences, virtual events around that. I think that you do have to show that, not just, oh, I want to be a life coach. You have to actually show that you could do that job,
Right.
and that you've, done X, Y, and Z to prove that you could be a life coach.
Right.
And one thing I have found when I have done, job searching at various points is I feel sometimes that employers, they can't sort of see that if you've done A and B, you can also probably do C. They just want you to see that you have done C in the exact kind of place that they are now, and that you've done it well. They have this,
Tunnel vision.
yeah. So
Wow.
you have to, my advice there is to tailor everything you do to look like C, rather than to try to convince them that A and B are the path to C.
Right, right. Oh, that's such a good tip. And I think that kind of plays into, when you, any career advice or career guide or coach
Right.
would say, tailor your resume to the job.
Yes.
Tailor your resume to the job. And if you don't have a lot of
Definitely.
stuff on there, that's okay, but take the elements of the jobs that you have had
Right.
and build those
Right.
into the bullets
Highlight
that they're
the
looking
most like C.
highlight the most of C. I absolutely love that. So I'm actually going to pause us for a second to see if we have any questions from our audience. Of course, I have a few rapid fire questions because
Okay.
that's how I like to close things up. But do we have a question?
Yes.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, she's going to bring the microphone down.
I was interested to know if you joined a journalism class in high school.
No, I didn't join a journalism class in high school. I would have if they offered it, but they didn't offer it.
Because
at the
we
time.
here at Pelham, we had the Pell Mell, and it was a wonderful opportunity to, the columnists would have,
Yeah.
assignments for each week, and then we put the newspaper together on a Thursday. And
That's great.
it was a wonderful opportunity to interview different people in the community and everything. I was wondering if you did that. I
Yeah.
also have another question. When you wrote the book,
Mhm.
and I guess this I don't think it's generational, but do you like to write it out, or do you write just straight on a computer? I know my sons go right onto the computer, but
Right.
when I write something, even the minutes,
Yeah.
I have to write it down.
Yeah. That's a good question. I have evolved over time because I used to do everything, write it out. But
Right.
now I type. Now I just type right into the
Okay.
computer. I did write for the student newspaper in college, and I do think that's great. And then I actually got to do a school newspaper as a volunteer at my children's elementary school, and that was a lot of fun, giving them sort of, here are the rules about great writing, and use active verbs and use analogies and
Right.
numbers, and all the things you learn in journalism school about how to put some spark into the writing. And that was really fun to work with the young children on that. We got to do some great interviews too. There was an Olympic swimmer, so we got to interview her, and we interviewed the superintendent and the mayor. And one time the mayor, he was giving this big address, and he said, the toughest questions I received from the What's Up Ward kids. So we were all prepared. Well, what about that thing at Ward Acres? So
No,
that
but a
was
school
fun.
newspaper is a great resource for a young person to
Yeah,
get involved and
it is.
get to know the community better.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you did
No,
that.
that is, yeah. Thank
And
you.
especially University of Missouri, I believe it's known for journalism.
Yes, it is
Yes.
known for journalism. It's the oldest journalism
Yes.
school in the country.
That's
Walter
right.
Cronkite, way back when, went there.
Yes.
And
Wow.
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, it is a really nice program. And I got to work in DC, covering the Supreme Court through that program. And that was really interesting because I would read the briefs on one side and I'd think, oh, these people were right. Their position is correct. And then I would read the opposite side's briefs. I was like, wow, these guys are right. So I could see where, legal writing is challenging.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, great.
I love everything that you said, especially about staying relevant. And I think that it's important to stay updated in your skill or,
Yes.
continued growth in that educational wise. I wanted to know what you've written so many articles. Is there a particular article that you think that you enjoyed the most and impacted a great amount of people? And if so, what is it and why was this article one of your favorites?
I wrote a lot of articles early on about learning, like learning language, how children learn how to speak. And that was fascinating to me. And I also learned about, we call it motherese, how, the mom with a new baby, they automatically raise the level of their voice. Oh, hi, honey. And the babies respond. And one of the things I learned was that within 72 hours, the babies know the mom's voice. They can distinguish between the pattern that the mom is using and that of another adult. And it's just amazing to learn about how children develop and evolve. And so I really loved, that type of writing. And, I'm always want to be learning something. So whenever I'm learning, I'm happy to be writing about that topic so I can learn more. So.
I have another question.
Great.
Who is your favorite journalist or writer?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. I like the New York Times writers, right. Frank Bruni and just, so many of them. And I think certain publications, and that's one thing that's been nice about the pandemic, is was access to a lot of really good writing in the New Yorker and New York Magazine and Atlantic, and a lot of publications made everything available for free. And there was always these wonderful curations of stories. Apple News does a really nice curation of stories every day. And so I love to read those. I can sometimes get a little too lost in, reading things and think, oh, I actually better start accomplishing something. So, but I have enjoyed that.
That's awesome. One thing COVID has done for me is pushed me back into a lot of reading.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciative of that because it made you pivot to, get back to what you love or try something different. Thank you so much, Colleen.
Thank you.
So I am going to, as
Okay.
we're dwindling down,
Yes.
sadly, to the end of our time, I have a few rapid fire
Okay.
questions.
All right.
And you can take a moment or two,
Okay.
but try your hardest to give me the
Quick.
first answer that
Okay.
comes to your mind.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So the most influential person you've ever met. I know there's been a lot.
I would have to say, a relative, my brother or my husband or.
Oh,
Yeah.
but I love that. Well, your brother's really on it, so
Yeah.
I'd say so too. Okay, the best book you read last year,
Oh, last year.
since we were all
Well,
home.
I'm going to just give one of the best books I've read is I love the book Cutting for Stone, which is written by a doctor, and their writing is beautiful, and so I would go with that one. There's a lot of great books out there.
Yes, there are. Your favorite outfit that makes you feel powerful.
Wow. I tend to be like more of a skirt and jacket kind of person.
Okay.
So I think whenever I'm wearing that, like a bright jacket and a dark dress or skirt, there you go.
Love that. Love it. To unwind, red wine or hot tea?
I would say white wine and tea sometimes, depending on the day and what's happening.
Okay. A song that gets you focused.
Wow. Let's see. I think, New York, the song Alicia Keys.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
It's so powerful.
I love that. A movie that you've watched a bunch of times.
Let's see. I was just talking about Father of the Bride because I went to a wedding and there was a wedding planner, and that was such a fun movie. And so I love that movie.
I love Father of the Bride. If you had to pick dog or cat,
Dog, hands down,
me too.
paws down.
What time of the day are you most productive?
The morning.
Oh, early riser. Okay. A quote that you live by.
Well, I always like the Rolling Stones quote about you can't always get what you want, but if you try some hard, you get what you need. I think that's sort of a good motto in a way to just think,
great motto.
okay, well, I have what I need, absolutely. And, what I want will come along at some point.
I love that. And my last one, what is a meaningful, I'm sorry, nope. What is success for you?
I think, you hear that and it sounds a little like a cliche to help people, but that is definitely one of my goals. Also, I think, to have faith and spirituality and to try to be a good role model in many ways, at least for your children, or in some ways, hopefully.
Well, I believe that you embody that holistically. You are a role model, you're an advocate, and you're just an amazing person.
Thank
I'm
you.
very
So sweet
happy
of you.
to know you, and
Yes.
I'm so thankful and grateful that you were able to spend this evening with us. For those that are tuning in at home, be sure to keep an eye out for some more upcoming programs that we have. And to our live audience, thank you so much and for your questions and comments.
Thank
So,
you.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. You did an awesome job. Thank you. We were
All right.
saying Giovanni needs her own talk show. Yeah. Yeah.